Hello, Facebook freaks and geeks. It's your boy Jerry coming at you from the Fortress of Solitude on a Saturday evening. So it's been a while since I've done one of these. In fact, I think it's been a little over a year and a half since I did my last video blog for Facebook. And I have a specific reason for doing this one. This is a little bit of a rant on an issue that's come up regarding DC and one of DC's titles, specifically Batgirl. So you guys may have heard, especially my comic book fans, freaks and geeks, may have heard about the controversial Batgirl number 41 cover. And I'll go ahead and show you that now. This was the cover for Batgirl number 41. And this cover came under fire from feminist groups because they claimed that it insinuated rape and violence of a female. Which I suppose on the surface that's probably true. However, as much as I appreciate people's opinions on the matter, I don't think some of these groups actually know enough about comic books and the characters that are involved to really know what's going on here. And let me delve a little further into what I think is the really crux of all this. And that is, I've been collecting comic books, I would say religiously, for about 20 years. I've been reading comic books since I was a kid. And I can tell you that through all the titles that I've collected, whether it's Marvel, DC, Vertigo, Image, you name it, I have seen a lot worse content than the cover of this. And specifically, I can bring up many different characters who I think are a lot more violent in many ways. Marvel has the Punisher, Daredevil, Deadpool. Just with DC alone, DC's had several different storylines that I would consider a lot more controversial than this. My comic book fans will probably remember Death in the Family, which involved the killing of Jason Todd, his version of Robin. In this case, the character of Jason Todd was hated so much by fans that DC played around with maybe possibly killing him off. And because the character was hated so much, they actually had a 1-800 number that you could call and you could vote on whether or not Jason would live or Jason would die. In this case, an overwhelming vote was to kill Jason Todd off, and he was brutally murdered by the Joker. Now, speaking of the Joker, my comic book fans will also recall The Killing Joke, which also involves Batgirl, aka Barbara Gordon. Now, in The Killing Joke, Joker, without hesitation, shoots Barbara Gordon through the spine, which relegates her paraplegic to a wheelchair. And she takes on the persona later of a character called Oracle. Later, she's able to get up and walk. That's a long story. I don't want to delve into all that on how that came about. But specifically regarding the Joker, and I'll hold this up again. Now, the Joker is a psychopath. And the crux of the Joker's psyche is this. The Joker is capable of a lot of things, but two things he's not capable of doing. And that is rape of a female and the harming of an innocent child. It's two things he's never done in comics. Now, real-life psychologists have actually delved into the mind of the Joker, and they have said that he's the only character in literature or in illustration that is able to turn his psychopath, if you want his craziness, on and off. The Joker is just as soon as to hold a 2-minute conversation with you, as sane as you and me, as he is to pull out a gun and shoot you in the temple. And the Joker really, he doesn't care about the acquisition of wealth. He doesn't care about the acquisition of anything really materialistic. And my comic book fans will also know this. When these characters all team up against the good guys, very rarely do you ever see the Joker involved. Why? The Joker's not a team player. He has his own unique way about going about what he does. And in his mind, this is just as sane as what I'm doing right now to the video camera. And for feminist groups to stereotype a cover, the crux of this is this. This issue has not even left the shelf yet. It's not even, you can't even buy it. I'm not really sure how the cover got leaked out to the general public. But if their goal was to make sure that young kids didn't see this, well, they failed miserably at it. All you got to do is Google Batgirl number 41 cover. It's all over the web. I downloaded this picture myself to save for this example. So it's everywhere on the web. So if their goal was to make sure kids didn't get a hold of this, well, they failed. That brings me to my next point. Comic books have changed in the last 50 years. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean. In the last 50 years or so of comics, we have gone from covers like this, right, to covers like this. Arkham Asylum Madness. Ever read this, comic book fans? If you've read this, you know the content that lies within is pretty heinous. Ever read this, comic book fans? Same deal. The content that lies within is a lot worse than what's on the cover. In other words, it kind of goes back to the old cliche, never judge a book by its cover. Well, feminist groups judge the book by its cover. That brings me to my next point. The female involved in this is Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl. And folks, let me tell you, and comic book fans, I'm sure, especially those that read DC, will know this. This lady right here is more than capable of defending herself. Okay? And I'm sure when the title finally releases and hits the shelf, and I will be one of the first ones to buy it, I'm pretty sure that the content that will lie within will be well worth the read. And my point is this: if you're gonna debate something, if you're gonna argue something, get to know a little bit about what you're riling against. These groups that were so against this cover know very little about comic books, in my opinion, and the characters that are involved. Now, I don't stop at just the feminist groups that were involved in this, or any group that would have hated on this enough to get it pulled. Shame on DC. Shame on DC for falling under the crutch of these individuals before this comic book ever left the shelf, and they pull it for another cover. So I'll wrap up this by just saying this. Again, if you're going to debate, if you're going to argue, and if you're going to rally against something, why don't you get to know a little bit about how the other half lives a little bit. Get to know the character involved. Never judge a book by its cover. I am appalled at the fact that nothing more than a cover allows this to never see the light of day as far as being a cover of the comic book is concerned. Once again, those groups failed at hoping that this cover never sees the light of day, because guess what? Once again, it's all over the web. Now, before I end, I will also say this. Parents, because comic books have changed over the last 50 years, pay attention to what your kids are doing. Pay attention to what your kids are Googling on the internet. Pay attention to your kid in the bookstore. Because unfortunately, comic books have changed in that they are a lot more violent. However, comic books, especially the newer ones, have a little thing at the bottom. Okay? There's a little rating. That tells the buyer what this particular comic book is rated as, and who it's specific for. Rated T for teen, parental guidance suggested, same as movies. Pay attention to what you're buying for your kid and to what your kid is watching. Because they can get their hands on stuff that they shouldn't be reading. And because comic books have changed, they aren't the same comic books necessarily that I bought or you bought as kids. In short, just know what your kids are doing. For those groups that hate this cover so bad, I would implore you to do a little research and get to know a little bit about what you're rallying against. To DC, I would say, have a change of heart. I would love to see this cover make it on a graphic, make it on maybe the graphic novel or somewhere down the line, because it's really a shame that this art would have to be shelved because of a few groups' hatred against it, because they don't know enough about it to know what's going on. With that, I'll end, and I'll just say, please, your opinions are welcome. I will be posting this to Facebook, so please post a comment to my Facebook page. If you don't feel comfortable enough posting directly to my page, you can always inbox me. If you have my number, you can text me. But please, all comments are welcome, negative or otherwise. And I will leave everybody with Excelsior to my man Stan Lee. And you guys have a good evening. Peace out.